don't see a red light. I think we're on. We're going to say we're on, okay?
All right, then.
So, hey, let me set the tone here. This is, as always, this podcast will change your life. We are in downtown Chicago. We are doing our first walk and talk in a while. I was trying to remember some of the illustrious predecessors for this, and now I'm remembering last winter was the last one. I spoke to Steve Karras, short story writer, out here, Scott McClanahan at one time, Greg Gerke, and now, dude, if I get your name wrong, this is a long-running problem of mine. I want to call you Garret Schuelke.
Oh, you got it right.
Awesome. It looks like Garret Schuelke. It should be Garret Schuelke. Anyway, Garret and I are walking north on LaSalle. We are in the loop. I have to pick up my son at school, so we are turning this into an opportunity to do a podcast. How are you doing, man?
Oh, I'm doing great. Into 4 days to my vacation, and yeah, life's good here in Chicago, man.
It is good. It is. I should say, by the way, this isn't, which I love, which is where we started, which could be a whole show on its own. We'll see how it goes, but you're actually like on a lit vacation, right?
A what?
Like a literary vacation.
Yeah, I am. I decided a few months ago to basically read at every open mic that I can and record it and hopefully put it up on Bandcamp for free. Either a full album or like an EP. Depends on how good the tracks are, and they've been doing really good so far.
So that's really funny. So that's even well beyond what I was projecting onto you. So you've been here 4 days. How many open mics have you hit so far?
Well, actually, this is my third day in Chicago.
Okay, third day here.
Yeah, I was in Kalamazoo on Friday, where I did a reading for my editor, Zach Elmblad, his art exhibition. So, along with that, and the 3 that I've done here so far, yeah, got about 4 in the bag.
So wait, you've got 3 in 3 days in Chicago alone?
Yeah.
So, dude, tell me where you've been so we can give them shout-outs.
Let's see, I've been to the No Shame Theater, which is located at the Lincoln Loft in Lakeview.
Awesome.
They were extremely nice and great stage. Last night I was at the Gallery Cabaret in Bucktown. That was also pretty good. I really like that bar. They got great design. And tonight I'm going to Weeds at the Hideout. Weeds poetry reading, which I actually read at back in 2011, my last year at college, when I went here on spring break for a week.
That's awesome. And really, Hideout is one of the great, it's not just one of the great Chicago institutions, but one of my favorite places. And I finally got to read there a couple of years ago, and I felt like I had crossed some sort of line. Like I can finally check that one off the list. It's just a great place.
Yeah, there's also a poet there, and I don't know if he's going to be there tonight. Maybe I'll message him on Facebook.
Who's that? Let's give him a shout out too.
His name's Howard Friedman.
I don't know him.
Oh, he's a really cool guy, musician and poet. And I actually, before I decided on the places I wanted to reach here, I messaged him asking him for like advice, like, hey, you got any suggestions? And gave me a whole bunch, and well, 2 of them was Gallery Cabaret and No Shame.
So it's funny, this will not be timely enough to catch you in real time, though I like the idea of that, but you're here for a week. What else is on your schedule coming up?
Well, like I said, I'm just going to be checking out a lot of places I've been to before, like a lot of bars and nightclubs and touristy spots like the Lincoln Park Zoo and the Shed Aquarium.
I've heard of them. One of those is free. The other one is very much not.
Lincoln Park Zoo is free. Shed Aquarium is not, but both worth it for their own reasons.
Oh, well worth it. And you know, it's funny. I am not a zoo person, but I am a parent who lives in walking distance from that zoo. And I have spent more time at that zoo in the last, say, 10 years than almost any other spot in Chicago.
Oh, wait. So you live in Lincoln Park then?
No, we don't. But we're close enough to the zoo where I've made my kids walk there many times.
Oh, because actually where I'm staying at is right in Lincoln Park. It's called the Chicago Getaway Hostel.
Where's that?
It's Arlington, on Arlington Place, right close to Clark.
I'll have to look it up. I'm trying to picture where that is. This is where I start sounding like a non-Chicagoan and someone who didn't grow up here. I immediately get beyond my, even 20 years later, I get beyond my actual knowledge base. You know, speaking of knowledge base, though, it's funny. One thing I said to you before we started recording is you are proving something this week that I have said for years to anyone who will listen. I also say it as a father and a full-time worker. But if you want to do lit stuff every night of the week in Chicago, you pretty much can anytime you show up. I mean, you're proving it like nobody's business.
Oh yeah, and one thing I like about here so far is that, one, you have a more receptive crowds for it, or at least they're more enthusiastic.
They're great.
And two, they're, like I said, more lit-centered. I mean, I'm from Grand Rapids, Michigan, second biggest city in Michigan after Detroit, and yeah, we have our lit readings and more so open mics where I've been reading for the past few months. I've been wanting to do a lot more spoken word stuff. And they've been cool and all. I've been meeting a lot of awesome people. The problem is that I'm essentially the only literary poet spoken word guy. And I guess it's just not as enthusiastic as it's been around here.
Yeah, no, it's very unique here. I always said to people, because I never wrote a sentence before I moved to Chicago. So another thing I've said repeatedly, none of which anyone's interested in, is that it's possible I would have started writing anywhere I was. Like, I hope I was going to start eventually. But it's very meaningful to me to have started here because it's such a literary place. I mean, I had no concept of it. It's not why we moved here. And yet there are so many readings and people are so cool. And I'm sure there's a million examples of where people aren't cool and things have gone poorly. But it just hasn't been my experience overall. And most people I'm friendly with, especially people who aren't from like the lit scene, like went to one of the MFAs, like you can carve out a spot here.
Yeah, it's not as pretentious around here as, say, New York, which I've heard a lot about.
Well, as a former New Yorker, I'm very protective of our great city and state. But no, I'm not pretentious.
No offense, sir.
No, it was a joke. I am the least defensive, not least defensive, I'm very defensive, but I don't need to defend New York. It can take care of itself, luckily. But you're here, that's awesome. Dude, give me a little more of your background. My relationship with you has been primarily social and lit, and I'm going to hit those threads in a minute, but maybe just tell me a little bit more about, so you grew up in Michigan and all that business?
Yeah, born and raised there, lived there all my life, even though I've been wanting to move out to someplace else like Chicago.
But right down the road.
Yep. Yeah, it's only like 2.5, 3 hours away from me, but...
By the way, this is what rush hour traffic sounds like, which I gotta say isn't terrible, but we are crossing through it.
Oh, Chicago taxis.
Crazy. I apologize for subjecting you to this.
No, I've been going here for 7 years now. I'm kind of used to it.
This guy thinks he's going to roll.
It reminds me of the video game Crazy Taxi.
Which, you know, I may be showing my age. I thought you might say Frogger, but that would make me really old, wouldn't it?
Oh, okay. Now I see the correlation now. But yeah, born and raised in Michigan. I was actually born and raised in Alpena, Michigan, which is located up in the Northeast. Here,
okay, yeah. Show me on the hand. For those of you not here, if you know anything about Michiganians, it is Michiganians, right? Michiganians, thank you. They're only allowed to show you where they live on the palm of their hands. So let me see where we are, somewhere above the thumb.
That's our privilege as Michiganians. No, right here, Northeast Michigan, it's not in the UP, we're like below it.
Okay.
But yeah, Alpena is technically the biggest city in the northeast part of the state, but that's really not saying much.
But you can still take a certain amount of pride in that, right?
Somewhat. As I've grown, I'm about to turn 30, I've come more to terms with it, and I just kind of calmed down, I guess you could say.
But you don't live there now. Now you live in Kalamazoo.
No. Actually,
oh, you're back there.
No, actually, I spent about 3 years in Kalamazoo attending Western, but I've lived in Grand Rapids for about 4 years now.
Okay. So how's Grand Rapids in comparison?
Oh, it's vast. Well, it's not as different as, say, between Alpena and Chicago, but there is just a big difference between culture and jobs and just general things to do.
So talk to me a bit, if you would, because, again, I didn't start writing till I got to Chicago. I am, in a way, the worst kind of East Coaster. I have lived East Coast and West Coast before coming here. I don't think I ever had a snobby feeling, a flyover vibe, but I really didn't know much. And, you know, I've been struck continually how many writers people love, and at least writers I love, come out of Michigan, and I'm wondering how much of a lit community, outside of what we were talking about, that there's an event here every night, there may not be in Grand Rapids, but how many, like, did you come up in that scene? Is there a scene? Do you feel some kindred spirit? Like, I'm thinking about, I think I told you we're going to get to your actual writing, but, like, I have read your work, and I felt very reminiscent of Barry Graham to me.
Oh, thank you.
A couple less tacos, and actually a little more violent, and less drugs, more or less. Give or take some drugs. But I remember reading it, and I didn't know if I was just projecting the Michigan thing on there, but it really did feel like there was a vibe. And actually, you're friends with him, right?
Oh, yeah, I am. I've technically met him, I think twice. Once for a reading at Madhouse, which I checked out, and then, before his accident, he set up like his own place for Madhouse.
Right, so let's give Barry Graham a shout out too, and hopefully healthy recovery, man. I'm telling you, when I first started writing and first started going to readings, one of the first dudes I met, one of the first short story writers I really loved out here, and always so super generous and nice to me. I mean, I feel like I haven't seen him in forever, but he's just a great dude.
Yeah, that's exactly how I would describe him. He's always been pretty chill with me.
Good, because are there other writers? I'm thinking like the Hobart crew comes out of Michigan.
Oh,
I assume they're still based there. I mean, I don't even know.
And if you talk about a lit scene, I personally never grew up with it because, again, desolate northeast Michigan town. Right. But if I would say there's a literary scene, I'm guessing obviously Detroit. There probably is one, but I'm not familiar with it. But there is a little bit of a crew there in Ann Arbor, like I said, with Hobart, with Elizabeth Ellen, who is awesome. And great writer herself, very generous and welcoming.
Matt Bell, who is probably now, I'm sure he's not an Arizonian, but certainly when I first got out here and he was first breaking out, Michigan as well.
Yep, Aaron Butch, Elizabeth's partner.
Right.
He recently, I think it was recent, he put out a book on Stephen King's The Body. Yeah, right, part of the Bookmark series. Yep. Yeah, and that dude, again, been a presence as long as I've been trying to write out here. Yeah, he's a cool guy, too. Good. So it's funny. So these people are all there, somewhere, mostly Ann Arbor? Around there, which makes sense, being the University of Michigan is right there. Of course. They're close to Detroit and everything. God, they got that great bookstore there, which isn't so new anymore, but Literati, which is one of the great ones, man. It really is. Oh, semi-correction. Barry Graham's actually more based out Ypsilanti, which is like right next to Ann Arbor. Okay. There's obviously like huge differences if you go between them. I mean, I noticed that like the second time I talked to him, like I'm looking around Ypsilanti, I'm like, dude, I'm mostly used to Ann Arbor because I've been there, but this is vastly different. Yeah, let me not offend any Michiganians who understand there are subtle differences which I may be greatly glossing over. So, dude, talk to me a bit then. You're in Grand Rapids. Did you get an MFA there? No, I graduated from Western Michigan University in 2011. I got a general education degree, bachelor's in arts, and I lived and worked there for about another year. Helped run a house venue called the Black Lodge. Got fired from my then job, and got another one in Grand Rapids at the warehouse I've been at for about 4 years now. Okay. Been there ever since. So part of that is a very leading question, which is to ask, how did the whole writing thing, I mean, you've been really prolific, so I want to come back to that in 10 seconds. I said you're just turning 30 now, or you are 30? I'm going to be turned 30 on the 8th, the same day as shout out the reading. That's this week. Good. So, I mean, talk to me like how the writing thing came about. You clearly have met writers, you produce writing, but you're not necessarily from a writing scene, and you didn't necessarily focus on it in school. Like, how did it happen? Well, let's go back to the past then. Please, always. Throwback. But, I started writing back in elementary school, I think the 5th or 6th grade, just silly, imaginary stuff. But then in junior high, I really got into writing video game reviews and video game journalism because I was a huge video gamer, and one of my all-time favorite magazines called Electronic Game Monthly. I don't think it's a publication anymore, but then I was like, I want to be just like them. get into high school, and that's when we have an actual journalism class, and I'm encouraged to go into that because I like writing so much.
That's really cool. Yeah. Good. So you have a whole history behind it.
Yep, and then, well, that was all before. I consider my professional career, if you want to call it that, starting in 2006 when I graduated high school. I officially started going by my pen name, Garret Schuelke.
Is this your real name?
No, my real name is Gary Thomas Schuelke.
And you know, Garret Schuelke is fine with me, but that's good to know.
Yeah, a lot of people are surprised about that. Even my editor who's publishing my next book was like, really? I didn't know that. I feel betrayed.
Well, I do not. I'm just glad to be, peeling away the layers of the Schuelke mythos. So, you're publishing throughout high school, you're doing the gaming, you have a journalism class. Like, is there any point where you think, I'm going to be doing this, like this is my thing?
Yep.
Like, are you consciously thinking about that?
Wait, consciously thinking like always...
I'm going to be a writer, like this is what I'm going to be doing.
Oh yeah, that's yeah, I still to this day do it even when I'm not writing. I'm always thinking about it in some aspect, like, okay, I gotta write this section of the story, I gotta outline this, I want to edit this, I gotta market that. I mean, writing is always in my mind one way or another, even if I clearly don't want it there.
So this is funny, I'm going to put you on the spot. I'm also going to mention that we're walking by Leghorn at this place, Ohio House Motel, which has been here forever and had a very crappy diner. Now it's got this very hipster chicken place. So if you're back in the neighborhood, Leghorn is awesome.
Yeah, I am familiar with this giant McDonald's over here too.
Of course, there's some weird name for it.
Rock and Roll McDonald's.
Thank you.
Wesley Willis.
Again, do I not sound local? I'm like, yeah, there's a name for it. Okay, I'm embarrassing myself left and right. So my question was, because I was listening to the podcast I posted yesterday. And I got into a whole exchange with the poet I was talking to. We're going to try to pronounce her name right. I never do. It's so embarrassing. Shandell Beers. I think I got that right. Shandell Beers. And we were talking a bit about, what part of one's brain makes you a writer versus a musician versus an artist or a quilter. And, I always had writing in my brain, too. I didn't get started until I was your age. So it's fascinating, hearing you talk about it. But I'm just going to put people on the spot now. What do you think it is that makes someone think about writing all the time? Like, can you pinpoint anything that's like a trigger or, this happened and that was the end of it? Like, do you remember a starting point or a stopping point where all of a sudden you're like, I'm a writer?
Yeah, I would think it was probably back, like I said, in 5th or 6th grade when I started writing silly stuff. And
wait, but how do you think that happened? That's the part I'm trying to tease out. I know you...
Probably like some English class I was taking at the time, where it's like, okay, kids, we're going to write a 2-page story today. Yeah, despite the material at the time, obviously, I really enjoyed it, and honestly, like I said, the writing came with other stuff that I was interested in at the time, and, well, I wouldn't really think about stuff like work and class conflict and all that other great stuff until years later, but even back then, I was thinking like, yeah, I think this would be a better job than, some of the stuff that's around here.
I would think so. If we're allowed to call it a job, I would agree. So, it's interesting. My association with you is fiction, which we're going to talk about. But when I saw you tonight, I think even since we started recording, you've described yourself as a poet and someone interested in spoken word. And then I went and did a little homework, which I rarely do, because I know the associations I have with you. But you have published poetry in the past, which I don't think I realized.
Oh, yeah. If I were to compare to, I've had way more success having prose or short stories, fiction in general, than I ever have with my poetry. Like, a lot of it is more self-published. In comparison, really haven't had a lot published in publications outside of like little zines that are long gone or aren't online.
Interesting, but you do have, I noticed or read, though none of the names are popping up, I apologize, in my brain, you do have a couple of chapbooks out earlier?
Yeah, that was actually my first real delve into self-publication, is that, well, technically I started writing poetry in 2007, and by 2008, I felt that I had enough that I wanted to self-publish it. And keep in mind too, I'm really late to a lot of things as I've learned over the years, and I was not aware of how ebooks or PDFs worked at the time. So I just solely created my own zines. I found like a poetry chapbook format off some like woman's magazine for free download, and I just started making my own. The first one was called Blind Grave Robber, which is probably out of the two of them, the best one that I did make. You know, I sent it out.
Clearly it's all filled with humor pieces?
I wouldn't call it humor. A lot of it was influenced by this poet named Reagan Butcher. He was at least with his poetry, he was associated with this anarchist collective called Crime Think. Now he does general science fiction, fantasy novels and series. He's really doing well for himself.
So were you drawn to anarchy or anarchists, or is it him in particular? What's the draw?
Him in particular, because I knew about Crime Think beforehand. I was interested in anarchism at the time, and Crime Think was part of their letter series, which I guess was like their literary arm of their then company. Wait, no, not company, collective, my bad.
Got it.
And, no, he put out two poetry books with them. One called Stone Hotel, Poems from Prison, because he was in prison at the time when he wrote these poems, had them published. And then another one called Rusty String Quartet. And about his style, what attracted me to poetry was just how short and direct it was. And I was always raised on the poetry that has to be long and flowery. You have to have like a specific message behind it.
So this raises an interesting question. First off, let me say that I both consciously and unconsciously want to get more poets on this show, and I am both consciously and unconsciously achieving that. So that's purely just a pat on my own back. We can ignore that. But I want to say that out loud. I'm very pleased with myself. My question though is, when you say raised, I know that's also a metaphor, but did you grow up in a literary house, or is that just what you got exposed to in high school?
That's actually Reagan I got exposed to in college, but no, I wasn't really raised in a literary household per se. Both of my parents are from, you know, middle class, lower middle class backgrounds. My dad works at the cement plant, and he's on the verge of retiring. My mom works in the public schools, and she too is on the verge of retiring. And well, they encouraged me to read. They obviously wanted me to do that, but it wasn't like you know, an ideal artistic household like you hear about some writers or artists.
Sure, yeah, well, that's one of the things I'm always interested in, right? Which is partially why I was pressing you on sort of where you think it comes from. Like, I'm really fascinated by how people get into writing and think about writing, and you know, here you are, you're self-publishing, and it's all very interesting to me. So talk about the transition then from poetry to fiction. So my experience of knowing you or meeting you, or however we first connected, was that we first connected, and I'm totally going to get this wrong, was your novella. Please pronounce that for me.
Oh, Anamaki.
Anamaki, I'll never get that right. And I keep wanting to put a W in front of it and call it Wanamaki. So I should probably know this. What does Anamaki stand for?
Oh,
what does that mean?
Oh, it's I was looking for basically the novelette, however you want to call it, the short novel takes place in Alpena with my character Floyd Spicer.
Right.
I basically wanted to call it something that was related to Alpena, but not like call it something that everyone would know, like the Sunrise Side or something. Anamaki is the old Native American word, I think, for like the Thunder Bay River that goes through there.
Okay.
And
I mean, I was assuming it was something like that, but then I thought, seeing your sort of anarchist and potentially even goth leanings, I thought it could be something completely different.
Oh my gosh, that's funny because
you do have a goth phase, right?
Not goth. I say it's more punk rock.
Okay.
Because I was more interested in that culture and music. I mean, I wore black. It was my favorite color for a while.
And I think I must have seen on social media somewhere that you, in fact, dyed your hair black at one point, right?
Yeah, I did. That was for an actual goth party in Kalamazoo.
Good. I didn't make that up. Good.
Yeah, and I'm actually I do. That's actually my dad's hair color, black, and I always kind of been jealous of him for that. So
black is a good color. Very well. So okay, so Anamaki.
Yeah, Anamaki. Yes.
Anamaki. That's a novella. That's when I first got exposed to your work. I mean, I have to say.
Yeah, I contacted you. Please, Mr. Tanzer, can you review my book for your blog?
Is that how that happened?
I believe so. If I'm recollecting right.
That makes me smile. Well, I really enjoyed it, and
thank you.
It was interesting. I'm going to say all this terribly, and you'll make it sound better. But Floyd Spicer really broke my heart, and it was funny because I know when I wrote about the book, I had gotten caught in the rain. This is going to sound like the worst, middle-class dad white guy thing ever, but I was out running, and I got caught in the rain an hour from our house, and by the time I got home, my phone had totally corroded, and I was in this really bad mood for a day or two, or at least a day or two, and then I read your piece, and I thought, Jesus Christ, compared to Floyd Spicer, I'm doing great. Who the fuck am I to complain about corroded phones and my inability to take photos on Instagram? Then I felt very guilty.
No, don't. That's, I guess, not to go into a rant, but that's one of my complaints in life is people who, what's the word I'm looking for? Debase or degrade other problems. Saying oh, well, this person has it worse than you. No.
Well, I appreciate that. My mom always said, if it's your crisis, it feels like a crisis. It qualifies. But it was not meaning me, anybody. But it was funny. I thought, Floyd Spicer, I want you to comment on this however you want, but one of the things I reacted to with that outside of my phone and my bad juju, but one of the things I know I react to with friends and with myself and with anybody is this idea that people feel stuck or trapped. It's a huge trigger for me personally on my own making decisions, but I know I tend to react to it in other people. If they seem stuck and they're not aware of it, it can drive me really crazy. And I kept thinking with Floyd Spicer, if anything else, this dude is really stuck and he really doesn't know how to get out. Is that me projecting onto the book, or is that one of the ideas?
No, absolutely. In the book, I guess to spoil the plot, he technically goes off to college in our town. He bombs at that college. Then he has to move back in with his parents and attend the local community college. So yeah, Spicer literally just got away from everything that he wanted to get away from. Then he gets dragged back by his own doing, and it's just It
felt heartbreaking. It's funny, meeting you, because I'm sure there are elements of that which are biographical, where you grew up, people you know. But of course, that's not your story. But that's not your story at all, is it?
Maybe, no.
Well, but I guess I'm just thinking you finish school, you keep producing art, you're doing all these things. He really can't. He can't get out of his own head.
Oh yeah, Spicer isn't an artist. He really is, I guess, just a regular working class dude. That's one way to put it.
But even then, it's interesting, right? You can be working class and not be so fucking self-destructive. He drove me crazy and made me feel empathy at the same time, which I know you're probably telling me not to feel. But I just thought, God damn it, man.
No. I don't tell people how they should feel or how they interpret.
I appreciate that. But God.
It's how everyone does it, and as I've learned, it's kind of a waste of time with some people. You're cool, yeah. But I've met some people who are just really staunch on their views, or they just can't get a certain way of thinking out of their head. And I'm just okay, man, I'm not going to argue your interpretation anymore, even if I think it's completely wrong.
Well, partially too, and I wrote this when I wrote about the book on my blog. I had just reviewed a book by an author I'm friendly with, Lavinia Ludlow.
Oh yeah, I read that review.
Right,
too.
so she had written Single Stroke 7, her second book, and her book and your book, though the characters are different in a lot of ways, they actually felt very similar to me in that you and she are close in age, and it made me feel like you guys are a solid generation, possibly 2 younger than me. That your characters reflect what feels. I'm also a college teacher now for the first time in my life. That you guys reflect a certain something that I did not grow up with, which is there really do feel like there are less options.
Oh yeah.
And for work, we graduated from college, a bunch of friends and I, or maybe all of us, And the ones who didn't already have like graduate school or something lined up, we had literally nothing lined up, and nobody cared. Like, there was no concern that we couldn't go out in the world and possibly find something. And, you know, the students I teach and the characters you write about, it feels almost completely the opposite. That if there isn't something readily available, there may be nothing readily available. It's not just that they got a problem.
Well, that's the thing, too, with the setting Alpena. I guess I'll talk about the real-life Alpena.
Yeah, please, because that was on my mind, and I don't know it.
Well, I guess to set up what I'm about to talk about, we recently had a hotel open up downtown, Holiday Inn Express. That is a huge thing in my town because it's a big attraction opportunity, and more so, it's a job opportunity because Northeast Michigan, like a lot of northern Michigan towns, is pretty sparse on like the good-paying jobs, the one with the benefits, the type you can make a career out of. I mean, pretty much the only real two that I can think of, and I'm sure there's someone from Alpena, they listen to this, will hardly disagree with me about. You can either work at the local hospital, or like my dad and his great-grandfather and even myself temporarily work at the local cement plant. Even that's been having trouble over the past few years. So yeah, I do realize what you mean there when I talk about sparse opportunities, because Alpena, it's gotten better over the years, especially after the whole Great Recession thing, which hit us hard.
Right.
Yeah, it's still pretty much sparse opportunities.
Well, maybe I said it poorly earlier. I guess the way he feels stuck to me is that he's got his own problems, his own challenges, his own inability to get out of his own way, but he's also in a world or in a universe or whatever the right language is, that isn't exactly set up for him to succeed even if he gets out of his own way.
Oh yeah, I do believe that unless there's like something wrong with you or your circumstances, like you suffer from mental illness or addiction, or you literally come from an abusive home, all this shit may happen to you, but you do have to at least try.
He's not that, and that's why I guess when I met you, I thought, in that way, that's how it's not biographical. You're cranking. You seem to be.
Oh yeah, I'm just totally pumped. I'm totally pumped, motivated, asshole-ish. I'm a little.
Dude, that's part of it.
I'm not as bad as, like, say, Henry Rollins, but I'm kind of getting up there.
Of course, if that's your bar, then it's very hard to be that asshole-ish, though I'm a fan of his. So this is actually a good segue.
I'm a huge fan of his, too, actually. He's one of the reasons why I'm going more into spoken word and comedy now is because of him.
Oh, yeah.
Along with comedians Doug Stanhope and Patton Oswalt, who I both love.
Patton Oswalt, who was in town Friday night.
Yeah, I did see that, and I'm totally bummed I didn't get tickets, not just because of I'm here, but I guess he was going to talk about his wife's death.
I saw in the newspaper this morning that he did an hour set. He did back-to-back sets, but he did an hour set, and the second, and I don't know if he did the same set twice because he was doing a recording for Netflix maybe.
Yeah,
but the second half of the show was about his wife.
Yeah, he's making a Netflix special out of it.
I read somewhere that basically one of his running arguments with his wife is that there's nothing, that he would argue that the universe is rational, and she would argue it's not.
Oh, yeah.
And he said she clearly proved her point.
Yeah, that's part of his big act, too, there, at least, like, at the beginning.
Yeah, so, anyway, dude, let's use this, and we're reaching my end point, but we're doing great on time and everything else. But this is a great segue because I'm also well aware, which is one of the reasons I was excited to hook up with you today, besides getting to finally meet you in person, but you have a short story collection coming out when?
Probably the end of this month. It's called Hub Jamboree Stories, and it's being released through Elmblad Media Group.
And this is your publisher where we started, right?
Yep. Zach Elmblad runs it. He's my editor and good friend.
I have been lucky enough to get a sneak peek at that collection, so this is a great segue. But, it's funny, like Floyd Spicer, there's definitely a Floyd Spicer vibe going on. But I have to admit, a lot of these characters, and you can tell me if I overread it, so that's not the phrase I'm looking for, they seem a little more desperate to me than Floyd Spicer. Like, he seems like a guy who has sort of made some mistakes. He's gotten stuck, what have you, and he's back home. And, you know, home is not going to offer any opportunities. But I kept thinking with this book, these stories, you know, the characters felt more desperate to me, possibly more down and out, you know, and then intersecting with, and again, I kept trying to remember the first book better, but there seemed to be a lot more violence in this one, or at least a threat of violence, or at least violence for these characters was feeling like the best way to settle things. Now, is that accurate?
No, that's even something I noticed when I've been writing these stories. I mean, I technically, like 2 stories, Lycan and Hup Jamboree, I started beforehand, but I really started cranking out these stories in 2014. Coincidentally, it was after I got my appendix taken out. I had like 3 weeks of recovery. Jesus. So
now we should ask, this was in a hospital. You didn't wake up in a hotel room somewhere.
No.
That would be like one of your stories.
Oh, no. No, basically I got taken out, and my parents took me back up to our hometown, and I spent 3 weeks recovering. First week was just basically hanging around because I was sore and felt like I was going to get gut open at any time. Second week I started writing because I was better, but I was bored. So I was like, all right, I should finish this story, you know, finish Hup Jamboree. And I was like, okay, I got this idea, maybe I should write it. And that's literally what I did for the next 2 weeks, was write all these stories, and then it continued from there.
Oh, that's great. Well, so what do you think then, since you're agreeing that I didn't misread this, do you think, and I maybe you're making this illusion, so they ask, but do you think some of the feelings sort of violence or violence as communication came out of the physical state you were in?
It's possible, but especially, well, I would say that, but particularly
I think we're going to stop in this corner, and that way, you're most of the way back to your hotel, and I can cut over to my kid's school, but we'll finish the discussion.
Okay, well, but basically, yeah, I do see it as a way of communication, specifically with their lives. You know, Floyd Spicer, who's, like I said, who's a laborer and a middle working class guy. There's Imogen, who's like the crust punk who lives in, you know, shitty houses in Kalamazoo in the punk rock scene there.
This is probably what really reminded me of Lavinia Ludlow's work. So Lavinia, if you're listening, this is now a shout out to you, along with Barry Graham. And somehow I see the two of them crossing paths anyway, at least in my brain. That may not be accurate.
Yeah, and then finally there's Godin, who's a superhero character, and that's one thing I learned with Godin too, is that I just like to write exciting stories.
Yeah, so that would be my follow-up.
A lot of action, a lot of witty dialogue, and well, one thing I learned is that violence makes for good stories.
Interesting.
God,
I'm
sounding like Quentin Tarantino.
No. But again, it felt like an uptick, and it made me wonder. You know, is it the mood? Is it the state of the world? Did you just struck on a different sort of texture you were messing around with?
Yeah, I would say that, especially in comparison to like my first real tries of fiction. A lot of them were like, well, technically Floyd and Imogen's stories are slice of life. At least that's one term I heard about them. But everything I wrote then just really felt empty and boring and bland. And I didn't want to do these for these stories, or even the ones I'm doing now. I guess at the time I found violence not only just fascinating, but a way to make an interesting story. Like here, let me give you a great example. Charles Bukowski, his publisher John Martin was talking about his work in Bukowski Born Into This. He made a comparison like, what do you think people will like more? A poem about Bukowski seeing his daughters play and then taking her out to dinner, or him getting stabbed at 3 in the morning by a prostitute? Which one do you think would be a more enjoyable read?
Well, you know, when you frame it that way, that is a no-brainer. So this actually raises another question for me, though. And maybe it's influenced by the discussion of your hometown, or maybe it's my, again, own projection, state of the world. But these characters also, even more than Floyd, they seem like they're really down and out, right? There's a series of pieces which are really, touching. I don't know if that's the word, poignant. I don't know. People dealing with landlords and without being able to pay rent, and asshole neighbors and drug dealers. And it made me wonder, I think partially, again, slice of life, you're capturing what you know from where you grew up, but it also made me wonder, is there any intentional, and again, my projections, any intentional political statement there, or is that just what it is?
Oh, it's just what it is. I, first of all, tried to write a good story, something exciting. You know, something that people will like. If they can relate to it, cool. If not, then, well, it's not really my job, I think, to try and make you relate. I just want to entertain you. And, I wanted to say something else. Yeah, this is one of those moments where you have this really great thought, but then half of it just, like, goes out of your head there.
I mean, as the car traffic thumps your brain. But, again, it's interesting, because, you know, in a way, though, you have, it's not just a slice of life, you know. Again, I think also coming off the recent election, and you're really capturing folks in a way who are not benefiting from where the country's going, and are not going to benefit anytime soon. That's what it felt like as I was reading it.
Oh, now I remember what I was saying.
Okay, good, hit it.
No, I don't go out there, like I said, I write stories that I think I entertain people. Like, I don't go out there with a political statement or anything. If the characters have it, then cool, they have their beliefs. Whether they're my beliefs or not doesn't matter, because these are characters that are their own persons.
No, it's interesting. And actually what's interesting, and you know, now that you're saying that, is that, you know, per se, and again, I think you're talking about me as the reader, you know, it's not that the characters are evoking any particular belief or spouting any particular belief. I'm thinking about the situation they're in, like, you know, and again, these are things I always worry about. Like, if they lose their housing, where are they going to go? And do they have health insurance? And, you know, you talk about earlier addiction and mental illness and abuse, and those are all threads, and I mean, those are, to me, they feel like shades in the book, that they're sort of lingering there in the corner. And I just thought, you know, it's not overtly political in any way, but it does seem to be making a commentary about, again, I apologize, you know, sort of a group of people who are being left behind in certain ways, and you see they're in a way fighting amongst themselves.
Oh yeah, well that's because I've known those kind of people before in my hometown and in Kalamazoo, whether they're political or not.
Right, that's what I was trying to get at.
There is inevitably going to be a lot of infighting for various reasons. You know, I guess that's just part of humans in general, because that's one thing I've always heard, is that we're a tribal species.
Well, and also I think, you know, when there's a scarcity of resources in a limited place, you've got a small town. I grew up in a fairly small town, probably not as small as you did, you know, and when there's scarcity, people have to fight over what's available. I mean, if there's one apartment, I mean, one of the stories, there's all these people fighting in and around this apartment, and whether it's damaged and who's going to pay for that, and I thought, you know...
Oh, the flower man.
Yeah, if that's what you've got available, then that's what you care about, right? Again, it felt like lack of choices. It felt like people battling lack of choices.
Oh, yeah. Well, actually, in that story is because Floyd and his brother, father, and grandfather have to basically clean up this apartment that the grandfather owns after their cousin, who's a fuck-up and a felon, basically wrecking it. I would see that more with the Imogene story, Black Doom of Options, where Imogene and her other housemates basically get screwed out of their rent by this junkie who just stole everything.
So that one, you know, it's funny. The Floyd story I didn't find as painful. They're actually very nice. They really bookend each other really well. But the Imogene story I found I found it heartbreaking.
Because you relate to it?
I don't know, man, because then now you're looking at me like, dude, I don't write stories so you'll feel heartbroken. But there was something about it, just that they were not going to work that out. I guess, you know, personally I was thinking, too, it's like...
I know, it's really hard to work things out with junkies.
Well, that's what I guess I was thinking, like...
I actually know this from personal experience.
Yeah, so you're in this fucked up situation, and you can't make it right just because you want to do the right thing. That's what I was reacting to with that story. And I think it's a thread of yours. Again, my projection on your work, but kind of like, people can try to do the correct things, and that may not be enough. And that I always find endlessly frustrating. Not in writing, in life.
Well, again, I guess that's just an interpretation. I mean, personally, I think what Imogene did, you know, smash in the door with a sledgehammer, is a pretty reasonable way to go about it. But it
is reasonable, but she's still not gonna get her money back.
Well, yeah, but.
So, dude, what haven't we covered? And by the way, now I'm having a weird aha moment, even though I read both of these. Is it the same Floyd?
Yes, it is.
God, man, it's funny. I was going to ask you about that, and then you just said it, obviously. I think I thought, is he using the same name, which would be fine with me, but it is supposed to be the same Floyd.
Yes, Floyd, Imogene, Godin all belong together in one shared universe. I'm not going to go cliche and call some, like, the Schuelke verse or anything like that.
No, but it could be, you know, this could be your Faulkner moment. You are creating a community.
Oh no, yeah, I'm actually this influence comes from a lot of things like Ernest Hemingway's Nick Adams stories. Hemingway's a huge influence of mine.
Yeah, take a minute on that, would you? A couple of beats. Who are some of your influences? Again, I read it, I thought of Barry Graham, probably because of where you're from, but who are the writers that influence you?
Funny enough, there's a meme going around where it says, like, the 11 people that influence you the most.
I saw that.
So, I guess, to rattle off a little bit from there, I would say Haruki Murakami and Ernest Hemingway are, like, my big two. Like, those are the guys I look towards stylistically, character portrayals, even language. And, let's see, there's also Jack Kerouac. He was huge. And he's also another guy that got me with the idea of doing succession of stories with certain characters. You know, he had his Dulas legend. Then, let's see, there's also Jack London. He is also huge. And Robert E. Howard and Edgar Rice Burroughs. Oh man, I love Edgar. You know, you are the first person to bring up either of them on this podcast, and I loved them. Yeah. When I was my older son's age, especially. Yeah, those two were especially influential with Godin, who's a superhero. Yeah, I should ask you about that too, because mixed into these stories is a clear superhero character who's part of the universe, but seems to be still somehow in a parallel one. Well, that's the thing. It's all the same universe, and it's essentially Godin's world. But Floyd and Imogene are more the normal parts of it. Like, they really don't experience, like, all the weird super heroics, fancy stuff that Godin does. They are going to cross over, though. I do have a story where Godin does indeed meet Floyd and Imogene in Kalamazoo. They do interact. Okay. Well, dude, as I said, you're productive as all get out. So, man, we blazed through this. What haven't we covered here today? I honestly don't know. I was kind of leaving this up to you here. Well, and I've been happy to drive it. And still, I feel like I got to check in. Well, dude, do this for me. The book again, I was calling it Whoop Jamboree, but it's Hup Jamboree. Yeah, Hup Jamboree. And so that's coming out end of June? Yeah, end of June. And the publisher again is? Elmblad Media Group. And they're a Michigan group? Yep, based in Kalamazoo, Michigan at the Park Trade Center. Look them up. Elmblad Media Group, Zach Elmblad, formerly the New Scum. Okay, Zach, this is a shout out to you. Do the quick, where can we find you social media wise? Okay, this I'm actually prepared for. I was on a previous podcast where I kind of got tongue tied. I was like, I don't know how to do this. Zach, you're the publisher. Anyway, yeah, you can find me on my official website, GarretSchuelke.tumblr.com. I'm also on Facebook, Garret Schuelke. You'll probably find my personal and my profile on my fan page. My Twitter, @Garret Schuelke, which I really should update. And even though this will be written down, why don't you spell it for us? You are Garret with 2 R's and 2 T's, right? Oh God, this would be a great story. If it was longer, I would tell you. But no, it's 2 R's, 1 T. It is 1 T. I know, everyone puts 2 T's, because back in the day I thought it would be hip and cool to have only 1 T. It works for me, and then it's SCHUELKE? Yep, SCHUELKE, Schuelke, Garret, GARRET. Okay. Yep. And Twitter? Yep, @Garret Schuelke, all one word. And then YouTube, Garret Schuelke. Like, literally, if you Google my name, you will find me some way. But you with 1 T. We should stress that. 1 T, exactly. All right, man. So, look, bro, I'm so glad we got to do this. I'm going to see you in a couple of days. It's going to be your birthday, so we'll have a birthday drink. And I think we did good. We just got to walk an entire stretch of Chicago. Yeah, this was awesome. I used to walk Chicago a lot before I really got familiar with the CTA. Yeah, this went by way quicker and much more leisurely than most. I would agree, and I walk home all the time. So this is good, and I think you're probably about halfway to your hotel. You may not be heading there. Maybe. I'm probably going to go to, here's another shout-out to my favorite restaurant in Chicago. Oh, let's hear it. It's called the Pasta Bowl. It's located right on Clark. Mm-hmm. Yep. It's right by the Chicago Getaway Hostel, near the corner of Clark and Arlington Place. Love that. So. One of our biggest meltdowns with our children is when we decided to take them there and didn't check whether it was open or not. Ooh. And somehow, not that they have any particular affinity for the Pasta Bowl, that ruined everything forever. And that was an ugly night.
very ugly.
So
anyway,
you haven't been back there since?
Oh, I will never go near it again, just to play it safe. Anyway, dude, I think this is it. We're gonna sign off. We're not gonna edit. This will be posted someday. You will be Garret with 1T Schuelke on This Podcast Will Change Your Life. I should take a moment, as always, to remind people that you are, of course, welcome to rate this on iTunes. Management would love that. But you can find us wherever good podcasts are found. I think that's all of it.
Yeah.
Dude, beauty. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you. It's great to be on.
All right, brother. And now we will walk and talk our way off this recording.